Good evening, all of my 8th grade students. I'm Mr. Becker, and I'm making you this video for the first week that you were given assignments for the book Unbroken. And we'll do one of these wrap-ups each Sunday, and I'll talk more about that in a second. Before we get into any of the classwork that we have to talk about, I'm going to move my picture here. Yeah. Hopefully everyone is doing well. Hopefully you're staying safe. You should follow all the directions you're given by parents, by teachers, by everyone because I said so. And then you should definitely continue doing the reading, your independent reading and Unbroken because it makes you more smarter, which I think is correct or something. It's Sunday, so be sure to keep up with the reading that happens as we go on through the weeks. You'll see the week schedule in just a second that we'll be talking about. There are some reading assignments for this week for Unbroken. Before we get into the book itself from this week, let's do some classroom management stuff. The schedule hasn't changed. In Google Classroom, I posted the lists of reading assignments. So for Monday, Wednesday, Friday of this week, these are the things that you should be reading. And I will be posting material that fits with these days so that, for instance, chapter 5 is for tomorrow, 6 and 7, 8, and 9. And as you go through the book, you'll see that the different events that happen will correspond to different things we talk about and different historical things that I include as we keep reading. So Thursdays I'll do a short video, kind of not so much a wrap up like I'm doing now, but a list of some things for the reading. So this week, Monday and Wednesday's reading, I would throw some essential questions in with the reading to be aware of. If we were in class face to face, we talk about this stuff. I will provide some movie or video clips. I can do that. I'm not going to obviously post the entire movie because that would be bad, but I will do different clips of it. For instance, the movie cuts out an awful lot about Louis Zamperini's life and his childhood, and we don't see a lot of that, and it kind of has him grow up pretty quickly into high school and then the Olympics. Um, why? Why would the movie do that? And there's reasons for that, so we'll talk about those things. If things pop up in the reading as we go, worth talking about. And then if you see something that interests you, you see on the bottom of the screen here it says I take requests. So I would be happy to, whether it's by email or whatever else, if you have something that you wanted to talk about or a question you have about the reading, that would be a good thing for us to talk about too. Sundays, that's what today is. I'll do a wrap up for the work for the week. Now that's going to include our material that you were supposed to do. I'll also include historical stuff, and you'll see some of that in a minute. So things that not so much about just the reading, but about things that matter for the history of the book. We're talking about World War II. A lot of you were very interested in it. The book's good, the movie's good, but of course, World War II is a very important topic in our nation's history, and so the book brings up questions about that too. And then any quick points about the week's reading as well. Today is the first wrap up that we'll do, as I'm sure you know. We're going to try to do Zoom meetings too. So if you see on the screen here, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 different days in the week. We'll start small. We can do more depending on how it works out with the students and other classes you have. I do know there's other classes. I know that we're trying to fit. You can see the times here. We're trying to fit when we would normally meet as a class, but you might have some overlap. We want to prevent that. So we'll see how things go. So the first one is going to be Tuesday. That's this Tuesday. That's for third period students. That's going to be at 9:30 in the morning. I'll send you an email that has the information for that. And then on Thursday, 2 p.m., which would be our 8th period class time. And I'll send you a link for that too. The passwords and things for the two classes, the length passwords will be different. I guess I don't mind with students mixing between the two classes. But at the same time, I do want to kind of give each class, I have 40 something students total, but if we all meet separately, then there's a chance to have more interaction if there's a need to. So that's why we want to do that. So I want to give you some links to Unbroken, the book that we're reading, and of course the movie. In fact, this first link that I'll provide for you is an interview with Angelina Jolie and Louis Zamperini. So when the book first was announced, Louis Zamperini, and that's a picture of him on the right-hand side. Louis Zamperini was old, but he was able to move around and go places and do things. He was still speaking publicly on a pretty regular basis. As the movie really came out, it takes a while to make a movie, and as the movie really came out, he was much more frail. And when you watch the video in the link, which I'll talk about in a second, you can see that he struggles. You can find lots of interviews with Louis Zamperini, with him younger, but even videos from or interviews with him a couple years before this one. He was a lot more active and going out and things. As he got close to the end, he didn't move around so much, and that's actually one of the most sad things I think about this interview is that you can tell he's really having a hard time just kind of being around. So this is an interview with Angelina Jolie, who was the director of the movie, and with him, and then there's a number of other historical things that are included in there as well. Now, I'm going to go on to the second one in just a moment, but please note all of the links that I'm talking about. I did not put a link here in the video. This is just a description of what the links have. The links themselves are actually in Google Classroom. I sent a separate file for that. And so there are separate post for that. So when you go to Google Classroom, look for the post in the thread on Google Classroom that will include the link for the articles that we're talking about here, the videos that we're talking about here. This first one is not a YouTube video or anything. This is actually from NBC's website. So I think you might have to fool around with a quick ad in there. If you pause it and then start it again, I think the ad disappears. So, because I hate ads, and yeah. Next one here, this is, and the movie, of course, shows these bombers in much more detail, but there's only one left, 2020. There's only one left flying today. This company, this organization called the Collins Foundation, they travel around, and they actually were in Jamestown this summer. I think it's called the Wings of Freedom, but anyway, they were in Jamestown this summer, and they will come to different airports, and you can pay to fly in a World War II fighter plane or bomber, and this is one of them that you could go to. It's the last B-24 that's flying. The link for this goes actually to the Collins Foundation, so it is an example of a lot of different things there, but it's the page for this plane, and then there's a YouTube video embedded in their page that explains what the B-24s were like to fly in now, how loud they are, for instance, and you can see, in fact, they're so loud that you have to pay attention to the closed captioning for those videos so you can actually hear what they're saying. And then finally, this is an incredibly important speech. I actually meant to ask Mr. Pavlak exactly where he is right now, because I know you've been talking about in the past the Japanese internment camps. I'll come back to that in a second. But this is the speech that FDR gave after Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. And this is his speech about the day that will live in infamy, where he's asking for permission. He's asking for a declaration of war, to go to war with Japan. So you can see that speech. It's at history.org, but again, it's embedded on that page, and you can see and hear what FDR was saying as he spoke. Now, if we were in class together, there would be things we would talk about, and they're not just the book itself. Remember, Thursdays, we'll try to do that, but there's other things we talk about as well. And so this is actually behind the text here is a picture of Louis Zamperini running as he's training for the Olympics. And so there's things we talk about in class. And so one of the things, an essential question, we want to call it, who's to blame for World War II? Now, for these slides for the discussion, for the things we're talking about, for our book, we are talking about the Pacific theater of World War II. There is an awful lot, as I'm sure you understand, that we could talk about with Germany and Italy and the other Axis powers in Europe. But our book obviously focuses on the Pacific theater, which is going to be Japan. So this question deals with who's to blame for World War II. And most people think about Pearl Harbor and the bombing of Pearl Harbor and what happened and how people were incredibly upset about it. It's very much like after 9/11, the anger and the passion that were brought up in the United States and its citizens about being attacked. So that's something. And then the second item on here, it's less of a question than a statement. All bad things done are bad things, and it really doesn't matter who does them. Move the picture over so you could see the slide here. So the first essential question, who's to blame for World War II? It is much more complex than just Pearl Harbor. So there's other things to keep in mind. The Japanese, as a country, were looking to increase their land holdings, expand their territory. The Japanese were also looking to increase their access for the resources they needed, specifically oil and rubber and things like that. And the United States was really trying to not let them do that. They're trying to block the Japanese in lots of different ways. I'm definitely not saying that I agree or disagree with either of the countries here, but of course, if there were to be a country that were blocking us from doing something we wanted to do, that we felt it was our right to do, you can imagine we'd be upset about that as well. And so the next thing here, and as I said, that bad things done are bad no matter who does them. You've already spent time with Mr. Pavlak talking about Japanese internment camps and what we did. I'm putting we in quotes, like the United States did to Japanese. And they were established around the country. Not every state had a Japanese internment camp. I'm confident you know that. But there were quite a few of them. So here's a camp. Move my picture over there. Yeah, this is a camp out west, and you can see how the buildings are laid out. They're very close to one another. You can imagine multiple families, multiple people living in any one of those houses. So there's the idea of their personal space, the idea of their freedom, the idea of having their own place to live did not exist at the time. So this is a picture of a Japanese internment camp. And then this is another example of an internment camp, and you see that these are people on a train. On the right-hand side is the train, and then you see people on the left kind of waiting their turn. And in case you didn't notice this, this is barbed wire. So you have people really fenced in. Obviously, they're very close quarters. The Japanese that were in the internment camps suffered from many diseases and things like that. Look what's happening in our society today. The idea of social distancing. You have to be away from each other. These people are not very far apart. They're crammed in there. If you're able to see almost exactly in the center of the screen, there's children there. I mean, they're packed in there. It's very easy to catch illness. And while some of the people have big smiles on their faces, I should say, you can tell by looking at some of the other faces, they are uneasy. They may not be thrilled about it. And again, they're about to get stuffed onto a train to their new place where they're going to be living for some while. And then, of course, there's people, even on the roof there waiting to go. So lots of things happening in this one picture. Now, I'm going to end with this slide here because as time goes on, there is more and more discussion about Dr. Seuss, Theodore Geisel. That's the real name of Dr. Seuss, and the things that he had done and drawn. There's a bunch of things out there. We're not going to focus on everything. I want to focus instead on some of his World War II images. This is just the first one. I'll provide more later, but his World War II images where he is, and there's different reasons. Sometimes he's trying to get people to buy war bonds. Sometimes they're just an ad. This one is a little bit of an ad, and there's a few problems in this cartoon here. The first problem is that you see Jap Alley. Jap would be considered a derogatory term for Japanese Americans. I'm not going to start listing the terrible things you can say about different races of people, but that's not great. And then I'm sure you can see this, although this may be hard to see from where you are. All of the images of the cats there, they have very stereotypical features, both with the smile and the shape of their eyes. Um, in the last 20 years, since I've started teaching at Panama, there's a lot more discussion about how Dr. Seuss was um, or is uh, racist in his depictions of things, not the Cat in the Hat and not, Oh, the Places You'll Go, or I Saw It on Mulberry Street, some of the famous and popular and beloved books that people read all the time. There are other things he drew too, and it's worth questioning what his motives might have been. We'll talk about it later on, but there are quite a few cartoons that Dr. Seuss drew that would be considered questionable. Um, and so this is just one. I am going to end there for the evening so that we can get the video out and continue with our week. Remember, there are reading assignments for the week. You can see these in Google Classroom. And then we're going to attempt to have some Zoom meetings this week and then get really into Unbroken. There is this week and then one more week, and then we would have the week of Easter. I don't know when we will see each other again. We'll keep doing these things. We'll do Zoom meetings and stuff. But as far as when we'll see each other face to face, I hope it's sooner rather than later. I do hope that everything is going well with you, and I wish you all the best. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good night.